Hello and welcome to the AI Vantage. I'm your host, Saleem Hasham. Today, I'm thrilled to share my conversation with Saleem Jan Mohammed, Chairman and CEO of Google Cloud partner Egen. Saleem not only shares my name, but brings a groundbreaking approach, leading with a vision for clean sheet thinking. Egen does this by reimagining AI-led business processes entirely, rather than just making small improvements. In this episode, we dive into how Egen applies this to real-world challenges, like transforming mortgage underwriting for a major lender to dramatically boost accuracy and turbocharge employee productivity. We also discuss Egen's own journey in becoming an AI-first services firm, focusing on talent development and outcome-driven solutions. Let's get to it. Beyond the AI hype lies your next big opportunity. I'm Saleem Hasham, Director of AI Transformation at Google Cloud, where I bring more than 2 decades of working with CEOs and their leadership teams to deliver business impact. Join me as I sit down with the brightest minds from Google, our partners, and customers to share real-world stories and proven strategies for AI success. This is your seat at the table. Welcome to the AI Vantage. Fantastic. So let's begin with the human behind the AI. And so we had a fantastic dinner. I got to know all about you. And we share more than just a name, Indeed. Which is fantastic. But just help the audience understand who you are, how your journey's led to you to being at this moment in AI in what I think is a truly disruptive time.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's great to see you again. It's strange to meet someone with the same name, born in East Africa, grew up in the UK, worked in Canada, and now the US. We are definitely brothers from a different mother. But, I, as I said, grew up in the UK, went to university in Toronto, graduated with degrees in computer science and business, and started in 1990 with Anderson Consulting. Back then, Anderson Consulting was talking about business integration. Right. It was really the integration of people, process, technology, and strategy to create business outcomes. I think that's as true today as it was back then.
Absolutely.
Even with all of the technology advances we've seen over the last 30 years. I spent 30 years. I thought it was going to be a couple of years, but it, just like consulting careers go, 2 years became 30. I got to work all over the world, a couple of dozen countries, across various different industries, really driving large-scale digital transformation programs. My last job was running the West across all industries and services for Accenture, and I was part of the Global Management Committee. I retired in October of 22 to join Recognize, which is a private equity founded by Frank D'Souza, the former CEO of Cognizant, Charles Phillips, who was the president of Oracle and former CEO of Infor, and David Wasserman, who was a managing director at CD&R. Their thesis was that the volatility and velocity of change in technology is only increasing, and clients are going to need specialist technology partners to really help with the transformation journey. Partners that are deeply skilled, both from a domain and a technology perspective. So I joined up as an operating partner. I remember telling one of my clients that I was retiring from Accenture to join a private equity, and he laughed and he said, "I've never heard private equity and retirement in the same sentence before." And I can tell you now, 2 years later, that he was absolutely right.
Absolutely. I mean, clearly you don't play golf. Private equity and more work is the thing that drives you. Yeah. And so where I'd like to go, and we had a fantastic 3-hour dinner, and I'd love to sort of distill that conversation down.
Good luck.
Yeah. And so 3 things I took away that I'd love to just pull the thread on, right? And so I was really impressed, and you have, I think, a super interesting background. So consulting, super large scale SI, and now at the helm of what I will call a digital disruptor, right? Sort of AI first services. And so help us understand your sort of philosophy, and maybe I'll sort of start us with 3 things that I took away. One was this notion that you're a very forward-leaning CEO, right? And so you're embracing AI for its full potential. Yeah. You didn't come into this thinking, how do I evolve a traditional SI into something new, but how do I think about it in a sort of relatively new way? Your approach, I think, when we talked about your client service was everything is clean sheet. AI gives us the opportunity to reimagine, so let's go reimagine. And so maybe help us understand how transitioning into, as a retiree, your role at the helm of Egen has shaped how you think the industry is going to go, and then how are you thinking about client service? How is that impacting how you've structured your company, how you operate it, and how you execute?
Boy, there's a lot
There's a lot of questions there.
backed into that. Let me start by going back to the thesis of Recognize, right? Specialist partners with domain expertise around particular technologies and technology ecosystems. Recognize invested in October of 21 in Spring ML, a Google specialist focused on AI and analytics. Since then, we've acquired 2 additional companies, Egen, which focused on data engineering and platform engineering, and then Carrick, which was actually a company built by ex-Google folks with the intent of building the partner they wish they always had.
Right.
We brought these 3 companies together with the express purpose of creating a partner that can go from infrastructure to data engineering to AI and to ultimately building, cloud-native applications. For clients. The ability to span that spectrum, it's very difficult to do that across all 3 hyperscalers.
Absolutely.
Right? So, we saw the opportunity with Google as being, a clear opportunity. There was more white space. There was more innovation. We saw Google as a platform really built for sub-second search response times. So from the infrastructure layer up to the interface, it was purpose-built for, extremely large workloads, billions of users. So it was a Ferrari under the hood, if you will, versus a retail e-commerce engine. And so, we thought that this was the right partner to scale with. We certainly believe that it's a multi-cloud world, but we needed to sort of specialize in one and really sort of build a strategic partnership with one that we thought was truly the innovator. If I go back to sort of the roots of business integration, my perspective was that it wasn't enough to just be a technology partner.
Right.
You needed to really bring domain expertise into the equation to be able to speak the language of the client. And that meant industry and functional skills. So, our focus right from the beginning was we have to have the technology fundamentals, but we then have to anchor that in business value, industry context, functional depth to be able to create the business results that the client was looking for. It wasn't just about technology, it was about the ROI that you could create, the revenue growth, the cost savings, the customer experience improvement. And that's really what Egen is anchored around. We don't just think, most clients sort of approach the AI question as, how do I make it faster and cheaper? And I don't want to sort of muck with the process.
Right.
Our fundamental approach is clean sheet thinking, which is, how do you sort of reimagine that process in an AI-first world? So drop the silos, the constraints, all of the, if you will, friction that might exist in an existing process, and think about what that would look like if you started with AI and then looked at sort of adding intelligence to the process to create the outcomes you were looking for. And that was really the thesis behind what we do. And the fact is that we can bring behind that then all of the technology capabilities required to help a client get to end of job as quickly as possible.
Fantastic. And that's, I think, a revolutionary approach for many of our audience who are going to be much more traditional, commodity-driven, maybe lift and shift service providers. So as you think about the approach you take to client service, you've clearly been very thoughtful about this. And so what lessons did you draw that helped shape where Egen is and how it approaches a problem?
It's interesting. We did an assessment, or Everest did an assessment of Egen last year. One of the things that stood out for me in that assessment was that they said, most of the market is moving to horizontal solutions or, specific use cases. You guys have taken a solution approach from an industry standpoint, right? Whether it's underwriting, whether it's, building a data platform for a health system or a different retail experience for, customers of a retailer. It was really about sort of, okay, what is the art of the possible from a business perspective versus, talking about the technology, right? You're grounded in that, but you're actually focused on the business value. And that's really what we anchored our story on, which was we're about getting to new possibilities, if you will, with technology by bridging those two together.
And so what does that mean for how you think about skills within Egen? So, obviously business first sounds simple. It's actually quite a difficult thing to do. And as you're placing your bets on either reskilling, industries that you're going to focus on, and perhaps you can reflect on sort of use case demand that you're seeing from customers, how is that shaping then your go-to-market?
So the first thing was that it was focusing on specific industries. So if you look at sort of our commercial business, we focus on health and life sciences, retail consumer goods, and sort of, we're incubating financial services and comms media tech. So we narrowed that down. And even within that spectrum, there's a vast number of segments and functions. So, I think again, at our scale, we can't be all things to all people. We want to be very specialized. That's part of the thesis. I think that the second is then saying, okay, where are the low-hanging fruit? If our objective is to get a client from, idea to production within 90 days, which is our goal, right? And to really reimagine a process, we really need to think about the places where that makes the most sense. So, manually intensive processes, a lot of stare and compare type of stuff that humans have to deal with today in existing workflows or systems, large volumes of data, insight that can be gathered through AI. So, we try to really hone in on those use cases in the industries that we focus on that actually can unleash human potential, if you will, if they were relieved from having to deal with some of the drudgery, if you will, of the jobs that they were doing, right? So, our focus was very much on those kinds of use cases within the industries we had specialization in. In terms of skill building, the unicorn in this industry, if you will, is someone that has deep technology skills and can speak to a business person about the business value that they can create. Those are hard to build, right? We have many technologists and we have business people. We have few that live at the intersection.
Hard to mate them both.
Right. And so, for us, what we tried to do was really build what we call principal architects. These are deeply skilled technologists that actually come from different domains, some from retail, some from healthcare, some from financial services. They are really working with our sales team and with clients to formulate the business plan, the concept of the transformation, and then essentially laying out the roadmap and the strategy technically and from a business perspective, starting with business value. Ultimately, this is all rooted in what are we going to measure? What outcome are we going to create? And we're doing that typically with the end user that's going to use the platform that we're going to help.
So everybody rolls up their sleeves, problem solves together.
And what that does is it actually creates understanding, ownership, and ultimately adoption from the end user, right? This is not AI taking away someone's job. This is AI helping a person or a team drive an outcome that actually makes their job easier, more effective, and ultimately results in business value for the corporation that they work for. So our team of principal architects are really where we anchor sort of the combination of business and technical acumen. And then they're supported by several hundred people around the world that actually live deeply in the technology world that can execute that roadmap.
Fantastic. And so what are you seeing in the market that helps, I think, our partners and customers understand that there is adoption? So the trough of despair, existed while everybody was experimenting. The never-ending POCs, I think that period is now over, and we're into sort of these, what are the practical use cases that deliver value? And how are you seeing demand shift to adoption? And I'd love to sort of pull the thread on the 90-day to production. I mean, that's a very aggressive timeline. It's fantastic you're accomplishing it.
I think that this has, the AI world has moved from practice to performance, right? Like the idea of POCs, you can have, You can do a lot of sort of experience gathering. At the end of the day, you have to move fast, test results, and then adjust quickly. So our view is that extensive planning and sort of POCs don't get the job done. You really have to sort of rip off the Band-Aid, identify a sort of a measurable use case where you can sort of see the impact that AI can have, and then implement that, of course, responsibly with governance, with trust and transparency. But unless you actually go exercise that muscle of getting a use case into production, you'll never really know, right? So our perspective is, first of all, just define that business case that is going to be impactful. Don't make it a fringe business case. Actually make it something that's core to your business that you already measure, and then sort of drive, with respect to adoption. One thing that's key is you can't do this to people. You have to do it with them,
people,
right? So, that means, as I said, our principal architects working with the end business customer to understand their existing flows, to think about sort of the art of the possible, back to clean sheet thinking. It's, if you were to reimagine this process without all the things you don't like to do that create friction or constraints or bottlenecks in the process, what would it look like? Then we have to sort of anchor that in sort of what the technology can do. It's not a panacea, but it is something that can help drive, significant improvements once you understand those bottlenecks. But you shouldn't see them as constraints. You really need to approach this with, how are you going to change this process? But it then has to be anchored on business value. What's the ROI? What's the cost saving? How much efficiency are we going to get? What is the customer experience going to look like once we're done? Unless you have those measurable artifacts, adoption will never happen. Right?
And it sounds like I think the thesis of adoption is trust building, it's demonstrating practical results and measuring them.
Absolutely.
So let's maybe sort of unpeel the onion and maybe two examples, but let's start with a customer example. So is there one where you could walk us through this clean sheeting, trust building? And I'd love to understand the problem, the drudgery that we're trying to solve, how you solved it and how you measured it.
Absolutely. So, one really good example that I think everyone that's ever bought a house and had to get a mortgage.
Which is a truly painful process.
Right. It's, if you think about it from a customer perspective, you've got to put the mortgage application in, collect, lots of documentation, purchase agreements, bank statements, pay stubs, title agreements, send them off to get sort of your mortgage approved. On the other end of this, you've got a mortgage underwriter that has to read through hundreds of pages of documentation and assess, your candidacy for a mortgage and make a decision, right? That is a manual, highly manually intensive process. Again, a lot of stare and compare to look at documents. It's error prone and cumbersome, right? So one of our clients approached us with a big idea. With the new administration coming in, the expectation was interest rates would go down substantially, which would result in a refinancing boom. They have, hundreds and hundreds of underwriters, and their expectation was that with that refinance boom, they would have to hire hundreds more.
Right.
And so the question was simple. How do we use AI to be able to drive efficiency in our underwriting process and not have to hire hundreds of more underwriters? That, what we did was apply our clean sheet thinking. We had our principal architects work directly with the underwriting team, again, to understand their process, to understand the constraints, to look at the documents specifically that they had to, wade through with every application, and then sort of look through and determine an approach for completely reimagining that process. Again, we worked with the underwriters, right? This wasn't AI. It wasn't even branded as AI. It was, how do we make this better? We then built with them a financial underwriting platform that plugged right into their existing system for mortgage underwriting. So, it was in an intelligence layer, if you will, underneath their existing system. the results that we were able to create through that process were truly game-changing. If you look at sort of error rates on loan applications, 83% improvement in loan error rates. If you look at sort of productivity, the average underwriter's productivity increased 133%.
That's phenomenal.
Right. And then if you think about sort of the client as a whole, significant growth in revenue because their win rates went up, and the cost avoidance that came from the application not requiring additional underwriters. If you look at how that worked, though, so the AI basically pre-ingested all the documents that an underwriter would have to look at, right? And then answered the questions that they would have to answer on that application with a confidence score. The underwriter then went into their existing platform with the questions pre-answered and a confidence score from the AI and made a decision. They confirmed that the AI's recommendation was correct. If it wasn't, they would correct it and make the decision. No new technology that they had to interact with. They were using the same sort of workbench they always used, but now with intelligence underneath. As they made changes to the recommendations or decisions that the AI was making, the AI learned from that process, right? So it corrected itself, it relearned, and it improved over time, right? Which is what drove the accuracy that I just described.
And that's the notion of self-healing, so
Exactly.
learning from its own mistakes.
Exactly. And, if you think about this particular case, this wasn't a pilot or an MVP. This is in production right now. We've actually, over the last year, implemented 13 AI models into production, large scale. So if you think about the volume of documents I'm talking about here, 600,000 documents a day are processed by this platform. A day.
Wow.
And, within every second, just one of the use cases of the 13 that are in production, we generate 1.6 million tokens. And just to put that into perspective, that's the equivalent of the Lord of the Rings series of books, plus The Hobbit, twice over every second.
That's
right?
Phenomenal.
So it's an incredibly large, implementation. We think it's actually one of the largest Gen AI use cases on Google Cloud globally, right? And one of the first at this scale within this industry. I think the best part of this story, though, is that the adoption was automatic because the underwriters were involved in the process.
Right.
The stare and compare component of their jobs diminished substantially. Their productivity increased, their accuracy increased, customer satisfaction increased. The business case for the company, which was, reduce cost and increase revenue, was met. This wasn't AI taking someone's job away. This was AI actually improving a person's day-to-day activities and helping them do their job better.
And it sounds like the approach was, where can we remove drudgery? How do we do it under the covers so there's no new training or platforms? How do we provide guidance? To me, sounds like, how do I take an underwriter away from having to read thousands of documents, which nobody wants to do, to making a judgment, which is sort of the human skill that AI cannot do?
Absolutely. And even from a compliance and a regulatory perspective, that was a requirement, right? And a machine couldn't make the decision. A human would still need to.
Yeah.
And this enabled the human to focus on that decision versus going through reams of documentation. I think one other thing to just note on the, probabilistic versus deterministic, right? AI is not for everything. When you need to do a calculation, we actually used code, right? We applied AI where it made sense in the process to bring intelligence, and where something could be done with just Python code, we did that, right? And I think that you really have to be thinking about this, not, with the AI is the solve for everything. There are, better, faster, cheaper ways to solve certain very standard problems.
As if I could maybe decode the DNA of the approach. It's start with a solvable business problem, start with a business leader who's incentivized to do something different, use the right technology for the job, Gen AI is not going to solve everything, but there are a series of steps of different technologies that accumulate. But I love this focus on let's make the employee's life easier, happier, more productive. Let's measure the outcomes. And it sounds like that's what drove adoption.
Absolutely. And look, I want to, the hero in this story is the client CTO that made the decision to give this a go.
Yeah.
Right. And interestingly enough, this was not a Google Cloud client. Right. One of the things that we did was when we looked at the business case, we saw that Google's engine, the Gemini engine, was actually much more suited to solving this business case than the other alternatives. The client actually then made the decision to adopt, Gemini and Google Cloud to be able to drive this sort of outcome, despite the fact that the vast majority of their workloads were sitting on, either on-premise or a different hyperscaler.
Sounds like a decision made because you needed large context windows, you probably needed multimodal, so right model for the job.
Absolutely.
So Saleem, that's a fantastic example of where you've taken a practical problem, solved it with AI, had phenomenal results in productivity, on customer satisfaction, and I imagine employee satisfaction. Part of the challenge with AI is things change very quickly and you do need to pivot. And so what I'd love to explore is, the thesis of this entire program was, on the forward thinking that interest rates would come down. And of course they didn't, right? So aside from the productivity that you had, how did AI allow you to pivot the entire business model to find new terms of value?
Yeah, that's a great question. Our client faced that challenge because, as you said, interest rates stayed flat. So now we've got to generate demand. And so the idea, again, was how do we leverage AI to be able to generate demand in this kind of interest rate climate? And the solution we came up with together with the client was, well, what if we could create a voice AI agent for the client's 50,000 plus brokers that were actually interacting with end customers looking for mortgages?
Oh, wow. So turn it into a channel.
Exactly. To be able to generate demand in a flat interest rate climate. And so we worked with the client to build, if you will, an agent that represented their brand, their personality, and was trained specifically around mortgages to both make outbound calls and receive calls from customers about questions related to mortgages or their particular application. We built this application or this solution in about 8 weeks.
8 weeks?
8 weeks.
To production?
To production and launch with their broker community. And the idea was that, it should be able to represent the broker in a conversation with an end customer. So first of all, if there was a refinancing opportunity where you could save the client some money, it would make the outbound call. If the client called in and had a question, it could address that question broadly about mortgages or specifically about their application. It could schedule appointments with the broker. It could even make an outbound call and thank them for their business. So, and I think the CEO of the client really captured it well. It changed the environment for the broker such that they could achieve growth rates that they never thought possible. Because if you think about a broker, they're limited by their own time and capacity.
Right.
This agent works 24/7. Can take a call at any time of the day or night, address any questions, and really give back the hours to the broker to focus on closing mortgage deals. It's ultra low latency, natural language. You wouldn't know that you're speaking to a machine. In fact, we recorded several conversations that, people had with the agent, and they were surprised that it wasn't actually a human. Wow. Right. And to me, that's Gemini's technology, right? It's Google's technology in action, driving significant business impact. But the other thing is that we didn't replace any brokers. This actually enabled the brokers to focus on the higher value tasks of getting a mortgage closed,
right,
and let the agent deal with routine questions that might have been coming round, plus also generating top of funnel, if you will, for the broker to then work on closing.
It's a real example, again, of human augmentation. And you can imagine in an agentic world that I would get a natural language phone call to say, hey, we've done all of the hard work. Here's a mortgage offer. You have it underwritten. If you'd like to close, I'll pass you to a broker.
That's exactly it. You've captured it perfectly.
That's phenomenal. And so to me, the key lesson to distill, again, from the clean sheet, business-backed, impact-forward approach that you have, which sounds like a lot of mumbo-jumbo, but ultimately focus on the problem at hand, meant that you could pivot instantly because the business environment changed and find more sources of value.
Yeah, absolutely. And the client defined the problem statement.
Wow.
Right. As I go back to sort of that, AI anchored on a particular business impact that you want to create and unconstrained, if you will, by current processes or current approaches can, allow you to truly reimagine what's possible.
Which builds trust, show results, drives adoption. Same three things again.
And, one last point is just that, we try to use AI across our entire business, whether that's sales or marketing or engineering. Every person is encouraged to actually deploy, AI, whether it's sort of chat-based interfaces where they're using Gemini to write a document or a slide deck, or in actually, driving particular outcomes for clients. You have to live this stuff. You can't sell it to a client if you're not using it yourself.
Well, if you're not eating your own dog food, you will not know.
Absolutely. We prefer to call it eating our own caviar.
Fantastic. I'm sure you and I could talk for days, but unfortunately we have to bring it to a wrap. So let's have a fun question, right? So if I could put you in front of the gods of AI and you have any wish you want, what is the future AI application that you would be most excited about?
I think AI today lives in sort of the virtual world. I would love for AI to now live in the physical world. So I'm really excited about sort of the integration of AI and robotics. Like, a lot of companies are working on humanoid robots. And, the intelligence of Gemini in a machine that moves and interacts with you in your world, I think could be a really exciting thing to look forward to.
What would Saleem Bot do?
All the things that my wife has asked me to do for months that I haven't gotten around to would be the perfect challenge for an AI physical bot.
And can I borrow Saleem Bot?
Absolutely. It's, we'll call it Saleem as well, just to add. There'll be three of us then.
Fantastic. Saleem, it's been a really insightful
Very
conversation.
nice to talk to you. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, and we hope that you continue to tune in as we explore the AI Vantage. Thank you for tuning in to the AI Vantage. Be sure to follow us on social. If you're interested in learning more about the Google Partner Ecosystem, visit the address on the screen below. Remember, the best way to predict the future is to build it. See you next time.